Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be going over how much hit rating you should be getting on your rogue in TBC Classic. This is a really important question, really important thing to have a plan for, because especially if you're, talking about playing a combat rogue in either dungeons or raid, hit rating is going to be your best stat. You're going to want to gem a lot of hit rating, and you're going to be getting a lot of items with hit rating. So you're going to eventually hit the hit cap, and depending on, your group composition, the target of enemies you want to focus on doing the most damage to, your hit cap might vary person to person. So we'll be talking about all that stuff in this video. Now, real quick to mention, for those of you interested in PvP, 5% hit is absolutely mandatory for PvP, or you will miss your abilities. But there's also some talents the enemies have that can cause you to miss your abilities. So you generally, at an increased rate, so you generally want to aim for 7 to 8% hit in PvP as a general rule, so that not only are you not missing with your base mischance, but you're countering out some of the talents opponents can run that can cause you to miss. All right, moving past that into PvE. As we're talking about this stuff, again, talking about rogue, talking about dual wielding, a lot of this is not really going to apply to other classes because no other class wants hit as much as a rogue. And specifically, mainly this applies to combat rogues, because combat rogue is the spec that wants hit rating the most, and the most common rating spec and dungeon spec. So let's get into some of the basics, right? You have a 5% chance to miss, but when we're looking at auto attacks, we're going to have a 19% miss penalty. So throughout this, if your abilities are missing, well, you probably didn't put points in precision, or you have an insanely low amount of hit, or you're just a low level character. Beyond that, be careful not to confuse anything relating with hit rating to expertise. So expertise pertains to dodges and parries. So if you're seeing dodges and parries, that has nothing to do with hit rating. That has to do with expertise. And also, if you have expertise from your, racial, or even in talents, you can get expertise as well. That is not going to affect these hit rating caps. It is a separate deal. Missing has to do with hit rating. Dodging and parry has to do with expertise. So those are completely separate. So with that, let's get right into the numbers, right? The percentages. We'll start with the percentages, and then we'll get to the hit rating, which is a little harder to look at, a little more complicated just to process. So I think it's better to start with the percentages. So out the gates, you're going to have precision as a combat rogue. So generally, we're going to be looking at hit rating caps, assuming you have the precision talent, which gives you 5% hit. And so we're going to be looking at numbers that are like a 19% chance to miss against level 70s, and that increases all the way up till fighting a level 73 enemy, which is also the level classification of like a boss. So if you're fighting a raid boss, you're going to have a 23% chance to miss if you just have precision. So with that, let's then start talking about hitting the hit cap and what that really means. So the most important thing to note about hit cap is once you hit it, it is a hard cap, and all hit after that is completely worthless. So let's say I'm attacking a level 73 enemy and I have 24% hit. I am with precision, I would have 1% too much hit. It would be completely worthless, right? Nothing, no value. And I would be, at that point, I should be moving gems around or swapping gear around to remove hit rating until that 1% hit rating is gone, because I want to trade it out for other stats, because anything after cap is completely worthless. So that's the most important thing to remember, is when you're aiming for a certain hit percentage, you also need to keep in mind the other level enemies that you're going to be fighting. So in that example where I said I had a 24% chance to hit, and then once we add in precision, that puts, takes me to 29%, and I'd be wasting hit rating. It would get even worse if I were to fight a 72 enemy, and even worse if I fight a level 70 enemy, because you need less and less hit. So it's possible that you even set up, a hit cap focusing on raid bosses that puts you at a disadvantage when fighting mobs that are lower level. So the other, these are the important things to keep in mind when, selecting how much hit you want to aim for. Generally speaking, the more hit you can fit in, the more damage you will do, because hit rating is your best stat. In almost, barring set bonuses, you can always replace gems with hit rating gems, and your damage will go up so long as the hit isn't wasted, barring set bonuses, and until you hit the hard cap. So if you want to do as much damage as humanly possible to a boss, you do want to get as close as possible to the hit rating cap for that boss. But it's a trade-off because you're going to be wasting stats against low-level enemies. Whereas if you hedge your bets, for example, and get the maximum amount of hit for a level 72 enemy, you're going to lose a little bit of damage on the boss because you could have had more hit rating, which would have led to more damage. But you're hedging your bets. You're saying, okay, I'm going for a more balanced approach. I'm going to do more damage to level 70s, more damage to 71s, optimal damage to 72, and I'm going to lose a little bit of damage against a boss so that I do more damage to lower level enemies. So those are the decisions you have to be making when picking how much hit rating you want to aim for. So now let's talk about like one of the most popular philosophies. So I've seen this going around a lot. I've seen a lot of people talking about this. The most common hit rating number I've seen people mention is this 17% hit. And I actually don't agree with this as being the optimal number, but I'll give you the logic as to why a lot of people aim for 17%. So they're operating under the assumption that when they're raiding, they're going to have improved fairy fire on all the targets that they're attacking, and they do want to do good damage to the mobs in the raid that are trash, and they don't want to waste a massive amount of hit going for the boss, maxing out their boss damage and losing out on trash damage. So they hedge their bets and they go for the 17% hit, which is going to give them good boss damage, but really good, dungeon damage as well. And rather specifically, not dungeon damage, but raid damage when fairy fires up, or dungeon damage when fairy fires up, against trash and non-boss enemies. Now, the flaw I see in that just comes from my own personal experience, and that's that fairy fire is not up the overwhelming majority of the time when I play the game. And so I personally am going to aim for 20% hit. And the reason for that is it's in the same boat where it's hedging your bets. It's an optimal amount of hit rating when you're fighting a 72. It's a decent amount for 71 and 70. And also it's still good for fighting bosses. But I'm counting on the fact that the overwhelming majority of the dungeons that I do are not going to be with a balanced druid. Going even further, the majority of the Karazhans I do are not going to be with a balanced druid, because even in a 25-man setting, right, you're not always going to be in the group with the balanced druid. The balanced druid is not always going to be applying fairy fire maybe as quickly as they should be. And going a step further, sometimes there's just going to be a lot of enemies, and the balanced druid isn't going to be able to tab target fairy fire them all down. So I think for a lot of people, this isn't the end all be all, but in my experience, and I think for a lot of people, 20% hit might be the best number, because it puts you at the perfect amount of hit if you're fighting a raid boss that is fairy fired, and it puts you at the perfect amount of hit for like heroic dungeons for taking down the boss and dealing with the ads when there's no fairy fire. And I think those are the two most common situations that I'm going to find myself in, is dungeon situations where there's no fairy fire, maybe Karazhan on trash where there's no fairy fire, and Karazhan potentially on a boss with or without fairy fire. In both cases, 20% hit is good. So that is some philosophy on, kind of what number to choose. There's no like definite answer. 17% hit would be good. 20% hit could be good. If you're playing always with a Draenei in your group, you just always know you and your buddy are always grouping, or in raid, you're always in the same group. You can even account for that and go a little bit lower in hit. So now to show you the rating numbers. So this 268.6, this is the number a lot of people are aiming for. 316 is the number I am going to be aiming for. And again, these numbers can change. If I were to, one of my regular dungeon partners or whatever would switch to, a balanced druid full time, and I'm just constantly doing dungeons with a balance, I would probably, address my hit down to 270. Or if every single week I'm always in a Karazhan with a balanced druid, and it's really important to me that my damage is good in Karazhan, I might move down my hit rating as well to address the fact that I'm with a balanced druid more often than not. But I think generally there's going to be a lot of situations where you're not going to be with that druid. So I would set my sights on 316. So what does that mean? If you set your sights on 316, does that mean you're always just equipping every hit piece until you're at 316? Not necessarily, right? Just remember that hit is your best stat. It's always the best thing to gem until you hit the cap, unless there's a really good set bonus that's worth going for. And until that point, while you do want to, you're mainly going to be equipping items that do have hit because they're great for your character. You don't want to sacrifice a bunch of other valuable stats. Just because hit is your best stat doesn't mean that an item with a crazy amount of crit, a crazy amount of agility couldn't end up being better, even if it doesn't have any hit rating at all, right? I mean, take for example something like Spite Blade, right? There's no need to turn away a Spite Blade just because it has agility and attack power instead of hit rating, right? You don't need hit rating on every single piece of gear. It's just hit rating is your best gem to slot in, and hence the reason why you're going to run up against that hit cap. So I would recommend, taking some time to think about what kind of content do you do. Maybe you're always just running normal dungeons, and you can go even lower on hit and just always be expecting to be hitting enemies that are, even lower level. But at least in my experience and how I play, I think somewhere around 316 or 270 would be the best for most people. And for me, I'm going to be aiming for 316 to do as much damage as possible to bosses when there's Fairy Fire up, a decent amount of damage to bosses when there's no Fairy Fire up, while also doing good dungeon and raid trash DPS with no Fairy Fire up. So hopefully that helped you get an idea of how hit rating works in TBC. It's confusing. Leave some comments below if you have any questions on how hit rating would work, or if you've got any, tell me what hit rating you're going to be going for. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.